The great hall of the Ethilgard did not echo. It absorbed. It was a cavernous expanse of polished obsidian and singing crystal, designed not merely to house the ruling body of the Voltari Dominion, but to intimidate them into silence. The ceiling was lost in a haze of purple incense smoke that smelled of ozone and crushed violets, hiding the vaulted arches that had stood since the unification. Here, the light was always dim, provided only by the bioluminescent veins running through the marble floor and the floating holographic orbs that displayed the heartbeat of an empire spanning 3 spiral arms. But today, the light seemed colder, the shadows longer, and the silence that usually denoted respect was replaced by a suffocating, gelatinous tension that coated the throat and made breathing a conscious effort. High Counselor Thalcora sat at the apex of the crescent table, his chitinous fingers drumming a frantic, silent rhythm against the dark stone. He was old, his carapace faded to the dull gray of a dying moon, but his eyes, 4 of them, arranged in a semicircle, burned with a mixture of terrified fury and disbelief. Around him, the other counselors shifted in their gravity suspension fields. They were a diverse lot, representing the 12 castes of the Dominion, but they shared the same expression of existential dread. The holographic projection in the center of the room was not displaying trade routes or colony health statistics. It displayed a void where a star should have been, or more accurately, where a construct of metal and madness should have been. The coordinates were locked on the Shadow Sector, a region of space declared forbidden by the Holy Edicts 300 cycles ago. It was a graveyard of ambition, a place where the Dominion had once tried to play God and had terrified themselves so thoroughly that they had buried the evidence in the dark. But the evidence was gone. The obsidian star, the weapon, the mistake, the world killer, had vanished from its gravitational anchor. And the sensors, usually so precise, were screaming with the residual ion trails of an engine signature that was both crude and terrifyingly powerful. Thalcora finally broke the silence, his voice a low grind of tectonic plates. "Speak," he commanded, the word heavy with the weight of impending war. "Tell me again so that I may understand how the impossible has occurred. Tell me how a species that discovered hypervelocity travel less than a single generation ago has bypassed the null fields, navigated the gravimetric shear, and removed an object with the mass of a small moon without triggering a single alarm until it was already too late." The Fleetmaster, a younger Voltari named Xylas, whose armor was polished to a mirror sheen, floated forward. He looked small against the backdrop of the empty star chart. He did not look at the High Counselor. He looked at the data stream, as if hoping the numbers would change if he stared hard enough. "It was not stealth, High Counselor," Xylas said, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "That is the part we are struggling to reconcile. Stealth implies an attempt to hide. The sensor logs indicate that the Terrans simply walked in. They utilized a method of propulsion we have theoretically categorized as brute force trajectory. They did not weave through the null fields, they pushed through them. They saturated the local space with so much electromagnetic interference that our sensors were blinded by the sheer noise. It was not a theft in the night. It was a demolition crew arriving at noon." A ripple of murmurs went through the council. The Terrans, the humans, the newcomers, they were viewed as the unruly children of the galactic community, loud, messy, leaking radiation and radio waves, building ships that looked like flying bricks and smelled of burning hydrocarbons. They were tolerated because they were industrious and traded rare minerals, but they were not respected. They were certainly not feared, not until this moment. The idea that humanity, with their bolted-together cruisers and primitive projectile weapons, had dared to enter the Shadow Sector was insulting. The idea that they had stolen the Obsidian Star was a nightmare manifest. "They have taken the device," Counselor Vrek, the Minister of Science, whispered, his voice trembling. "Do they know what it is? Do they comprehend the instability of the core? That ship is not a vessel. It is a containment cage for a singularity that we barely managed to shackle. If they attempt to activate the engines, if they attempt to weaponize it, they will not just destroy themselves. They will crack the subspace strata of this entire quadrant. They have stolen a grenade, pulled the pin, and are now running home with it." Thalcora closed his eyes. He could feel the pulse of the Empire slowing, the blood turning to ice. The Obsidian Star was the shame of the Voltari. Built in a time of arrogance, it was a weapon designed to collapse. Stars to weaponize gravity itself. But the power source, the singularity core, had proven chaotic, hungry, and semi-sentient in its resonance. They had abandoned it, locked it away behind fields of null energy, praying it would decay before the universe ended. If the humans tinkered with it, if they poked the sleeping dragon, the resulting detonation would erase the Dominion's core worlds. They are savages, Thalcora hissed, opening his eyes. The fear was hardening into resolve. They are children playing with a loaded bolt caster. We cannot negotiate. There is no time for diplomacy, and they would not understand the science even if we explained it. They see a big ship, they take it. They likely intend to hold it for ransom or use it to bully their neighbors. He stood up, the gravity field whining as it adjusted to his height. We cannot allow them to reach their space. We cannot allow them to tinker with the core. If that ship detonates, it must do so in deep space, far from our worlds. High Counselor, Xylas stepped forward. Are you suggesting? I am not suggesting, Fleetmaster. I am commanding. You will take the first armada. You will take the Sunspear and the Void Walker. You will intercept the human fleet. You will not hail them. You will not ask for surrender. They have stolen the property of the Dominion, property that threatens the existence of all life. You will respond with fire. You will vaporize them and the stolen vessel before they can trigger the catastrophe. Do you understand? Xylas hesitated. To fire upon the humans without a declaration of war was against the code of contact. It was a massacre. They are towing it, sir. Their speed is limited, but to destroy the Obsidian Star, the explosion, will be magnificent and terrible, Thalcora finished. But it will be contained to the deep void between stars. Better a fleet of humans burns than the Dominion falls into the abyss. Go, Xylas, burn them all. The order was given. The council remained silent as Xylas bowed and retreated into the shadows. The atmosphere in the room shifted from fear to a grim, morbid anticipation. They were the elder race, the custodians of the galaxy. They had to make the hard choices. The humans were an unfortunate casualty of their own ignorance. Thalcora looked back at the hologram, at the red vector line showing the human path. It was a straight line, no deviation, no clever maneuvering. Just a slow, heavy trudge toward their own territory. It was the path of a thief burdened by gold, or so he thought. He did not know that a straight line is also the path of an ambulance. The void between the Shadow Sector and the Terran border was a place of absolute nothingness, a chasm where starlight struggled to penetrate the dust clouds of the Perseus Arm. Here, the silence of space was usually absolute, a vacuum where no sound could carry. But today, the vacuum trembled. It vibrated with the passage of giants. The Volturi First Armada was a sight that had not been seen in 500 cycles. Thousands of sleek, crystalline ships, shaped like teardrops and curved blades, moved in perfect synchronization. They did not use crude thrusters. They rode gravitational waves, sliding through the fabric of space with an elegance that defied physics. At the center of the formation was the Sunspear, a dreadnought of gold and white ceramic, pulsing with the energy of a captured star. On the bridge of the Sunspear, Fleetmaster Xylas watched the tactical display with a heavy heart. He was a warrior, yes, but he was a warrior of the code. Ambush was the tactic of pirates, not the Dominion, yet the logic of the High Council was sound. The Obsidian Star was a cancer. If the humans opened it, the gamma burst alone would sterilize the nearest 3 systems. He had to act. He had to be the surgeon who cuts out the infection, even if it meant killing the patient. Target acquisition, the weapons master intoned, his voice filtered through the tactical helm. Range 400,000 clicks, visual confirmation. The main viewscreen shimmered, the holographic overlay clarifying the distant image. Xylas leaned forward, his mandibles tight. There it was, the Obsidian Star. It was a black, jagged monstrosity, a fortress of dark metal that seemed to absorb the light around it. It looked evil. It looked like a shard of night. And surrounding it, like ants dragging a beetle, were the human ships. They were ugly. Xylas had always thought so. Boxy, utilitarian, covered in external piping and radiator fins. They lacked grace. There were dozens of them, heavy tugs, industrial cruisers, and a few of their destroyer-class escorts. They were lashed to the Dominion ship with magnetic cables thick enough to anchor a station. Their engines were flaring bright blue, straining against the immense inertia of the dead dreadnought. They were moving slowly, painfully. They are not in combat formation, the sensor officer noted. Sounding confused. Their shields are configured for radiation deflection. They are not maximizing forward deflectors. They are unaware of us. Good, Xylas said, though the word tasted like ash. It will be quick. Charge the lance batteries. Target the tow ships first. Sever the connection. Then we focus fire on the Obsidian Star's containment housing. We need to trigger the breach while they are still in the void. The bridge darkened as power was diverted to the weapons. The Sunspear began to hum, a deep, resonant vibration that rattled the teeth of everyone on board. The lance batteries, beams of concentrated plasma and coherent light, were the ultimate expression of Voltari wrath. They did not just burn, they unmade matter. Weapon charge at maximum, fleet synchronization complete, all ships locked. Xylas looked at the humans one last time. They were so small, so foolish. Why did they touch it? Why did they have to be so curious? Fire, Xylas whispered. The command was relayed instantly. The darkness of space was suddenly torn apart. From the prow of the Sunspear and the flanks of 1,000 escort ships, beams of blinding white light erupted. It was a silent storm of destruction, crossing the distance in a fraction of a second. The energy output was enough to boil an ocean. It was the fire the Council had promised, a cleansing, absolute negation of the enemy. Xylas watched the beams strike. He expected the immediate flash of vaporized metal, the shattering of hulls, the chaotic bloom of the obsidian star detonating. He braced himself for the blinding light. But the light did not come. Instead, the space around the human fleet rippled. It was not the blue shimmer of a standard kinetic barrier. It was something else, a geometric lattice of gold and crimson that snapped into existence the microsecond before impact. The lance beams hit the lattice and stopped. They didn't bounce. They didn't explode. They splashed. The energy spread out across the hexagonal grid like water on a hot skillet, hissing and glowing before being sucked inward. Report, Xylas barked, standing up. Did we miss? Negative, Fleetmaster. Direct impact confirmed, but reading massive energy absorption, their shields. They aren't resisting the energy, they are eating it. Impossible. No generator small enough to fit on those bricks could handle a terawatt lance strike. Sir, energy spike detected from the human flagship. They are rerouting the thermal load. Look at the obsidian star. Xylas looked. The dark, jagged hull of the stolen ship was glowing, not with the fire of destruction, but with a soft, pulsating blue light. The humans were channeling the energy of the Voltari attack through their cables and into the stolen ship. They are using our fire to jumpstart the derelict, Xylas asked, horror dawning on him. Are they trying to fire the weapon back at us? No, sir. Wait, we are being hailed. Hailed after we just fired a fleet-killing volley at them. Yes, sir, it is. It is a wideband transmission, audio only, very high gain. Put it through. The bridge fell silent. Static hissed for a moment, followed by a sound that Xylas did not expect. It was not the scream of a dying captain. It was not the rage of a warlord. It was the calm, rhythmic sound of a human exhaling smoke, followed by a voice that sounded like grinding gravel wrapped in velvet. Voltari Fleet, the voice said. It was a female voice, tired but utterly unshakable. This is Commander Alara Vance of the Terran Engineering Corps, Heavy Salvage Division. We appreciate the energy transfer. We were running a little low on the coolant pumps, but if you could dial it back about 10%, you're going to overload our heat sinks. We're trying to save your asses here, and you're making it very difficult. Xylas stared at the speaker grid. Save us, he whispered. Then he hit the transmit rune. Terran Commander, you have stolen a Class Alpha Doomsday device. You are towing a weapon that belongs to the Dominion. Surrender immediately, or we will escalate to kinetic bombardment. Your shields cannot absorb mass. There was a pause, a sigh on the other end. Look, Fleetmaster, it is Fleetmaster, right? I don't have time for a geopolitical D***K measuring contest. We didn't steal your ship. We're moving it because your Class Alpha containment was leaking anti-tachyons into the subspace manifold. If we hadn't clamped onto it 3 days ago and started pumping our own stabilizer fluid into the core, this entire sector would be a black hole right now. We aren't taking it to Earth. We're towing it to the Magnetar in the K7 sector to utilize the magnetic pressure to seal the breach. Xylas froze. Anti-tachyons? The Voltari Science Ministry had theorized such particles but had never been able to detect them. Lies. Our sensors showed the ship was dormant. Your sensors look for radiation, Vance replied, her voice sharpening. We look for heat and stress, thermodynamics, Fleetmaster. The universal law. That ship of yours was running a fever of 3 million Kelvin in the core, masked by your null fields. The heat had nowhere to go. It was building up pressure. We detected the thermal bloom from 3 sectors away. We came to put out the fire, not start one. Now are you going to help us push this thing, or are you going to keep shooting lasers at us? Because honestly, the extra power helps, but the kinetic impacts are knocking our alignment off. The bridge of the Sunspear was dead silent. The officers looked at Xylas. The concept was alien to them. The humans had detected a flaw the creators had missed. They had rushed toward a bomb. Scans, Xylas ordered, his voice shaking slightly. Deep spectrum. Focus on the connection points between the human ships and the target. Look for thermal transfer. The science officer worked frantically. Minutes passed. The humans did not fire. They just kept moving, their engines straining, the stolen ship glowing softly from the energy the Voltari had gifted them. Fleetmaster, the science officer turned, his face pale. She is telling the truth. The cables are not just towing cables. They are coolant lines. They are pumping liquid helium and something else directly into the singularity housing. And the energy we fired, they converted it to magnetic containment. If they stop, the core temperature spikes. Critical mass in less than 6 hours. Xylas sat down heavily. The fire he had unleashed had been caught in a bucket and used to water a dying flower. The humiliation was total, but so was the realization of what stood before him. These humans, they were not warriors. They were engineers, and to them, the Voltari Armada was just another variable in a physics equation. Cease fire, Xylas said, the words feeling strange. All ships stand down, match velocity with the Terran fleet. He keyed the comms again. Commander Vance, this is Fleetmaster Xylas. We require verification. Permission to board. Granted, Vance replied instantly. Bring a hazmat suit, it's messy over here. The shuttle ride to the human flagship, the Hephaestus, was a journey between worlds. Xylas and High Counselor Thalcora, who had been observing via link and demanded to see the truth personally, projecting his consciousness into a drone proxy, drifted past the gargantuan bulk of the obsidian star. Up close, the difference in philosophy was stark. The Voltari ship was art, flowing lines, inscribed runes, hidden function. The human ships clamped to it were brutalist machines. They were scarred, welded, exposed. They looked like tools that had been used hard. When they docked, the airlock hissed open to reveal a decontamination chamber that smelled of scrubbing chemicals and stale coffee. Commander Alara Vance was waiting for them. She was not wearing ceremonial armor or silk robes. She wore a stained gray flight suit with patches that read "OSHA is watching," and "I make things GO." She was short compared to a Voltari, soft-skinned, with no natural armor, but her eyes held a hardness that Xylas recognized. It was the look of someone who had stared into a reactor core and not blinked. "Welcome aboard," she said, offering a hand which Xylas awkwardly stared at before realizing it was a greeting. "Sorry about the mess. We've been running hot for 72 hours straight." "Commander," Thalcora's drone voice buzzed. "You claim to be saving us, yet you entered our territory without permission. You laid hands on the forbidden tech." "If your neighbor's house is on fire and they are asleep," Vance said, turning and walking down the corridor, expecting them to follow, "you kick down the door. You don't wait for an invitation. Come on. I want to show you the readings." They walked through the Hephaestus. It was a hive of activity. Humans ran back and forth with tablets, tools, and canisters. The walls vibrated with the power of the engines. Xylas noticed something unsettling. There were no weapons visible, no guards, just engineers. The Voltari were the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and these humans were ignoring them to focus on dials and screens. They reached the CIC, Combat Information Center, though it looked more like a mission control. A massive holographic table dominated the room, displaying a wireframe of the obsidian star. The core was pulsing red. "Here's the problem," Vance pointed to the center. "Your people built a singularity core, impressive, but you tried to contain it with static fields. You tried to freeze it in place. But a singularity isn't static. It spins, it vibrates, it has a frequency. Your static fields were acting like a dam, holding back the water but letting the pressure build. Eventually, the dam breaks." She tapped a few keys. "We didn't try to stop the spin. We built a clutch. We matched the rotation. We are bleeding off the excess energy, that heat I mentioned, and dumping it into our own capacitors. That's why we could eat your lance beams. We're already sitting on top of a volcano. Your matchstick didn't add much to the fire." Thalcora's drone hovered closer. You integrated with the core, but the mathematics required the processing speed." "We aren't calculating it," Vance said, looking at the alien leader. "We're improvising. The AI handles the micro-adjustments, but the strategy, that's human intuition. We feel the machine. We know when it's angry." Xylas looked at the screen. The timeline for detonation was oscillating. "You said you are taking it to the magnetar." "Yes, the magnetic field of the magnetar is strong enough to compress the event horizon. It will snuff out the singularity like a candle. But we have to get there. And we are heavy. The obsidian star is dragging us down. We're burning out our engines towing this beast. Vance turned to Xylas. That's where you come in. You came here to bring fire? Fine, we need it, not to shoot us, but to push. We need your fleet to latch onto ours. We need your engines. We need your power grid to stabilize the magnetic bottle. If we don't increase our speed, the core breaches in 4 hours. The magnetar is 5 hours away at our current speed. The silence stretched. The request was insane. The humans were asking the Voltari Armada to become tugboats for their own stolen superweapon. And if we refuse, Thalcora asked, if we destroy you now? Then the core breaches here, Vance said calmly. The explosion propagates through the subspace tunnels you use for travel. It hits your homeworld in about 12 minutes. We die, you die, everyone dies. But hey, at least you didn't help the monkeys, right? Xylas looked at the drone. He saw the hesitation. Then he looked at Vance. She wasn't bluffing. She wasn't afraid. She was just calculating the odds. High Counselor, Xylas said, his voice firm. The logic is sound. We cannot destroy the threat without triggering it. Our only option is to assist. Thalcora remained silent for a long moment. Then the drone bowed its head. The Dominion does not surrender, but we do not commit suicide. Fleetmaster Xylas, you are authorized to assist the humans, but this is not an alliance. This is a necessity. Vance smirked. Call it whatever you want. Just get your ships in position. We have a lot of mass to move. The scene that followed was unprecedented in galactic history. The elegant, golden ships of the Voltari moved in, extending gravity tethers to the blocky, scarred hulls of the human fleet. It was a visual dissonance, the union of art and industry. The Sunspear took the lead, locking its massive tractor beams onto the obsidian star itself. Synchronization in 3, 2, 1, Vance's voice echoed over the fleet comms. Punch it. Thousands of engines flared at once. The fabric of space groaned under the stress. The convoy surged forward, accelerating at a rate that strained the inertial dampeners. Inside the Hephaestus, Xylas watched the telemetry. The speed was climbing. The time to destination was dropping, but so was the time to detonation. Core temperature rising, a human technician yelled. The acceleration is destabilizing the harmonic spin. Compensate, Vance barked. Dump the heat into the auxiliary sinks, vent the plasma. Sinks are at 90%. If we vent, we lose the shielding. Do it. If the core goes, shields don't matter. On the view screen, the human ships began to vent glowing clouds of superheated gas. They were bleeding for the mission. Xylas watched as one of the smaller human tugs, pushed beyond its limits, simply disintegrated, its reactor overloading. It didn't explode in a fireball, it just turned into a streak of molten slag. We lost the Kodiak, Vance said, her voice momentarily tight. Close the gap, keep pushing. Xylas felt a surge of strange emotion. Respect. These humans were sacrificing their ships, their lives, to contain a Voltari mistake. They were not stealing the weapon. They were falling on the grenade. Commander Vance, Xylas spoke into the comms. The Sunspear has excess power reserves. We can shunt energy to your stabilizers. Your energy types are incompatible, Vance argued. You use zero-point extraction, we use fusion. Physics is physics, Commander, Xylas shouted, echoing her earlier sentiment. We will modulate the output. Prepare to receive injection. Xylas nodded to his tactical officer. Target the Hephaestus, not with weapons, with the power transfer beam, maximum output. A beam of pure gold erupted from the Sunspear, striking the human flagship. But instead of destruction, the human ship glowed. The energy washed over the hull, feeding the starving capacitors. The stabilizers on the obsidian star whined, then settled. The red pulsing of the core slowed. Stable, the technician cried out. We bought another hour. We're coming up on the magnetar, Vance said. Visu. Al range. Ahead of them, a dead star spun. It was a magnetar, a neutron star with a magnetic field so intense it could strip the iron from your blood at 1,000,000 kilometers. It was a lighthouse of cosmic death. Release sequence, Vance ordered. We have to swing the obsidian star into the gravity well at the precise angle. Too shallow, it skips off. Too deep, we go in with it. We will guide it, Xylas said. Our navigational computers are more nuanced. Don't get cocky, Fleetmaster. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, release. The magnetic tethers snapped off. The obsidian star, glowing like a demon's heart, hurtled toward the magnetar. The combined fleet peeled away, engines screaming as they fought the gravitational pull. Xylas watched the rear monitor. The dark ship fell toward the spinning star. As it got closer, the invisible hand of the magnetic field grabbed it. The singularity core inside the ship reacted. There was a flash of light, not fire, but a distortion of reality. The ship crumbled, crushed into a sphere of superdense matter, and then, nothing. The magnetar swallowed it. The singularity was neutralized, crushed by a force greater than itself. A shockwave of gravitational distortion hit the fleeing fleet, rattling the hulls, but they were safe. The dangerous ship was gone. The threat was ended. The silence that followed was different than the one in the council chamber. It was the silence of exhaustion, of survival. Days later, the two fleets drifted in the neutral space of the border zone. The repairs were ongoing. The Voltari ships, pristine and perfect, were using their repair drones to help weld hull plates onto the battered human cruisers. It was a small gesture, but a monumental one. Xylas stood in the observation deck of the Hephaestus once more. Thalcora was present, this time in the flesh, his biosuit humming softly. They looked out at the stars. "You saved the Dominion," Thalcora said softly. "You saved us from our own hubris. Why?" Vance stood next to them, holding a mug of coffee that smelled like tar. She looked out at the void. "We almost blew ourselves up, you know, back on Earth. About 200 years ago, we built weapons we couldn't control. We learned the hard way that when you split the atom, you share the fallout. We don't like seeing people make the same mistakes." "We underestimated you," Xylas admitted. "We saw your primitive technology and assumed primitive minds. We saw your silence and assumed guilt. We responded with fire." "And we responded with physics," Vance smiled. "Fire burns out, Fleetmaster. Physics is forever." "There is one thing," Thalcora said, his tone shifting. He seemed troubled. "The resonance data you shared, the reason the core became unstable." Vance's smile faded. She put the coffee down. "Yeah, that." "It wasn't random decay," Xylas said, the fear returning to his voice. "The core was vibrating in response to a signal, an external signal." "We traced it," Vance said quietly. "While we were towing the ship, the signal wasn't coming from the core was just a receiver. The signal was coming from outside the galaxy." She tapped the console. A star map appeared. It zoomed out past the Dominion, past the Terran Federation, to the dark edge of the galactic rim. "Something woke up your singularity," Vance said. "Something out there turned it on remotely. It was a ping, a location request." "Who?" Thalcora whispered. "We don't know," Vance said. "But the signal repeated a pattern. We decoded part of it. It's not a language, it's a schematic for the Obsidian Star." The implication hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. The Voltari had not invented the technology. They had found the plans in ancient ruins and built it, thinking they were geniuses. But they were just assembling a beacon. "The owners are calling their ship home," Xylas realized, his blood running cold. "And we just destroyed it." "They're going to be annoyed," Vance agreed. She turned to the two aliens. The distrust was gone, replaced by a shared, chilling realization of the scale of the universe. "We didn't just save you from an explosion, gentlemen, we just poked the bear. And this time the bear is coming from the dark." "What do we do?" Thalcora asked, looking at the human not as a primitive, but as an equal. Vance looked at the repairs going on outside. Human and Voltari engineers floating together in the void, welding, fixing, preparing. "You have the energy," Vance said. "We have the engineering, you have the fire, we have the shield." She extended her hand again. "We get ready together." Xylas took her hand. It was warm, it was solid. "Together," the Fleetmaster agreed. And in the deep silence of the void, the sensors picked up a new signal. Distant, faint, approaching against the flow of the galactic wind. It was not a chaotic signal this time. It was rhythmic. It sounded like the beating of a drum or footsteps. The fire had been extinguished, but the war had just begun.